The massive chamber of the Orbis Conference Center hung in the void like a crystalline jewel, its translucent walls reflecting the distant stars. Inside, representatives from 100 worlds sat in tense silence, their breathing apparatus hissing softly in the carefully calibrated atmosphere. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called with unprecedented urgency. Ambassador Talon of the Vani species stood at the central podium, his frail body trembling slightly under the weight of his ceremonial robes. His large, luminous eyes darted nervously around the chamber as he addressed the assembled delegates. "Honorable representatives," he began, his voice thin but determined. "The peaceful Volani system faces imminent destruction. Our intelligence confirms that the Koric Empire has mobilized a battle fleet of 200 warships. They will reach our homeworld in less than 40 standard cycles." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Volani system was renowned throughout the galaxy for its healing capabilities. Their cities were living organisms that could repair themselves and heal those who dwelled within them. They had no military to speak of, their entire civilization dedicated to nurturing life rather than taking it. "The Koric advance cannot be stopped by conventional means," Talon continued. "Their technological superiority and numerical advantage make traditional defense strategies futile." A bulky representative from the Gronth Confederacy rose to his 4 feet. "Then what hope is there? The Volani must surrender and negotiate terms. It is regrettable, but—" "No," Talon's voice cracked with emotion. "The Koric do not negotiate. They conquer, strip planets of resources, and enslave populations. We have seen this pattern repeat 26 times in the last decade alone." The council chamber erupted in overlapping voices, some advocating for diplomatic missions, others suggesting economic sanctions, a few even proposing a coordinated military response. But all knew these traditional approaches would fail against the ruthless efficiency of the Koric war machine. It was then that Ambassador Talon made his controversial proposal. "There is one species," he said, and the room fell silent. "One that might stand against the Koric. They come from a world so harsh, so unforgiving, that the Council classified it as a death world. They call themselves humans." The reaction was immediate and visceral. Representatives recoiled in their seats. Some made protective gestures with their appendages. Others voiced their objections loudly. "Primitives! Savages! They would be worse than the Koric." Council Leader Vox raised all 6 of her limbs, demanding order. "Ambassador Talon, you cannot be serious. Humans are barely out of their pre-spaceflight era. They've only established colonies on 3 systems beyond their own. Their technology is rudimentary compared to the Koric." "Yes," Talon agreed. "But they possess something the Koric do not. Something none of us truly understand." He paused, searching for the right words. "Humans evolve through conflict. They thrive in conditions that would kill most sentient species. Where we see impossible odds, they see opportunity." A vote was called. The decision to contact the humans passed by the narrowest of margins, 51 to 49%. The galaxy was about to witness what happened when you called upon Deathworlders for help. Far away, on the edge of human-controlled space, Captain James Reed stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, staring out at the infinite darkness. Reed was tall and solid, with the compact musculature of someone raised in Earth's gravity. His dark hair was cut short, military style, and a thin scar ran from his left temple to his jawline, a reminder of the colony wars on Proxima Centauri B. Lieutenant Commander Miller approached, datapad in hand. "Captain, we've received an encrypted transmission from Earth Command. Priority Alpha." Reed nodded, his expression unchanging. "My ready room, Miller." Inside the small office adjacent to the bridge, Reed activated the secure channel. The stern face of Admiral Brooks appeared on the screen. "Captain Reed, your mission parameters have changed. As of 600 hours, You are to proceed to the Volani system at maximum speed. Reed's eyebrows rose slightly, the only indication of his surprise. Volani, sir, that's beyond our territorial boundaries. I'm aware, Captain. This comes directly from the Security Council. The Volani have requested our assistance against a Korok invasion force. Reed had heard of the Korok, a militant species that had expanded aggressively in the past decades. Earth's intelligence on them was limited, but what they knew wasn't promising. With respect, Admiral, what exactly does Earth expect one ship to do against an invasion fleet? Admiral Brooks' expression hardened. Your primary objective is assessment. Captain Reed, evaluate the Korok threat level, gather intelligence on their capabilities, and determine if intervention is in Earth's strategic interest. Reed understood the unspoken directive. Earth government wasn't committing to saving the Volani. They wanted information on a potential future adversary. And if intervention is deemed necessary, then you will execute with extreme prejudice. Captain, the Security Council is prepared to authorize Protocol Omega. Reed felt a chill run down his spine. Protocol Omega was reserved for existential threats to humanity. It authorized any and all means necessary to neutralize the threat, regardless of collateral damage. Understood, Admiral. Prometheus will depart immediately. The transmission ended, leaving Reed alone with his thoughts. He had served Earth faithfully for 20 years, but this mission felt different. They were being sent to observe an alien genocide while gathering intelligence. The moral implications were troubling. When Reed returned to the bridge, his crew could sense the change in him. Set course for the Volani system, he ordered. Maximum speed. As the Prometheus entered hyperspace, Reed couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading towards something that would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. Ambassador Talon paced nervously in his private chambers aboard the Orbis station. The vote had been closer than he'd hoped, and now everything depended on these unpredictable humans. The Vani, like most council species, had evolved on worlds with stable climates and few predators. Their societies developed through cooperation rather than competition. Humans were different. They had emerged from a planet that seemed designed to kill them. Extreme temperature variations, natural disasters, predators, disease, and their own violent tendencies. The fact that they had survived at all, let alone developed spaceflight, was considered a statistical anomaly by Council xenobiologists. Talon's assistant entered, interrupting his thoughts. Ambassador, we've received confirmation. A human vessel has changed course and is heading toward Volani. They'll arrive in approximately 26 cycles. Talon's inner eyelids flickered with relief. And the Korok? 36 cycles until they reach Volani's outer defenses. It would be close. Too close. But it was their only hope. The Prometheus dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Volani system. Sensors immediately scanning for signs of the Korok fleet. Passive scans only, Reed ordered. Let's not announce our presence just yet. Lieutenant Kim, the sensor officer, worked her console with practiced efficiency. Captain, I'm detecting a large concentration of ships at the edge of the system's Kuiper belt. Configuration unknown, but the energy signatures are massive. Deploy stealth drones, Reed commanded. I want detailed information on their fleet composition, weapon systems, and vulnerabilities. The tension on the bridge was palpable as they waited for the drones to complete their mission. When the data finally came in, the situation appeared even worse than anticipated. 300 warships, Captain, Miller reported grimly. Not the 200 we were briefed on. Their capital ships are carrying what appear to be armor-piercing weaponry, designed to penetrate planetary shields. And their troop transports suggest a ground force of approximately 2 million soldiers. Reed studied the tactical display, noting the rigid formation of the Korok fleet. They moved with machine-like precision, but there was something almost predictable about their patterns. What about their communications? Reed asked. Highly encrypted, But our AI is detecting distinct command structures. They operate on a strict hierarchy. All decisions funnel through their command ships. Reed nodded, a plan already forming in his mind. And the Volani? 7 inhabited planets. Minimal defensive capabilities. Their largest cities appear to be alive, sir. Biological structures that function as both habitat and ecosystem. Reed opened a channel to engineering. Chief Engineer Santos, I need options. Can we engage a force of this size and survive? Santos's voice came through with its usual measured calm. Not in a conventional battle, Captain. But if we use our speed and maneuverability, we might be able to disrupt their formation. Their ships are powerful, but not particularly agile. Reed made his decision. Contact Earth Command. Inform them that intervention is necessary to protect Earth's strategic interests. It was a lie, of course. Reed had no evidence that the Korik posed an immediate threat to Earth. But he had seen enough conquest in his career to recognize the pattern. If the Korik were allowed to consume the Volani system, they would only grow stronger. Eventually, they would turn their attention to human space. More importantly, Reed couldn't stand by and watch the destruction of an entire civilization, not when there was a chance, however slim, that they could make a difference. Admiral Brooks' response came quickly. Request denied, Captain Reed. Your orders are to observe and report only. Earth forces cannot reach your position for at least 48 to 72 hours. Engaging now would be suicide. Reed looked around at his crew. They had heard the transmission. Every one of them knew what the rational choice was, what the safe choice was. Your thoughts? Reed asked, breaking protocol by soliciting opinions. It was Miller who spoke first. The Volani called for help, sir. They have 36 hours before the Korik reach them. If we wait for reinforcements. She didn't need to finish the sentence. By the time Earth forces arrived, the Volani would be history. Reed nodded. Lieutenant Commander Kim, prepare a hyperspace jump. We're going to position ourselves directly between the Korik fleet and the Volani homeworld. Sir, Miller said quietly. That's directly against orders. I'm aware, Commander. Reed's voice was steady. Any officer who wishes to register an objection may do so in the ship's log. No one moved. No one spoke. They had all seen the drone footage of previous Korik conquests, the methodical destruction, the enslavement of survivors. They might be disobeying orders, but they were upholding something more important. Hyperspace jump in 3, 2, 1. Kim counted down. The Prometheus vanished from the edge of the system, only to reappear directly in the path of the advancing Korik armada. Reed opened all communication channels. Attention Korik Fleet. This is Captain James Reed of the United Earthship Prometheus. The Volani system is now under the protection of Earth. Any hostile action against them will be considered an act of war against humanity. For several long moments, there was no response. Then a harsh, metallic voice responded in accented Standard Galactic. Human vessel. Your interference is noted. Your destruction will be swift. Korik Empire claims rightful conquest of Volani resources. Reed had expected nothing less. All hands to battle stations. Execute Plan Alpha. The Prometheus surged forward, its fusion drives pushing it to speeds that would have torn apart most ships. They were aiming for the lead Korik destroyer, a massive vessel bristling with weapons. They're charging weapons, Kim reported, her voice tense but controlled. Evasive pattern Delta, Reed ordered. Deploy countermeasures. The Prometheus rolled and twisted in space, throwing off the Korik targeting systems. Energy beams lanced through the void, where the ship had been moments before. Bring us underneath their rear quarter, Reed commanded. Target their propulsion systems. It was a tactic that had served humanity well during the early colony conflicts. Strike at the enemy's ability to maneuver, then disable their weapons while they were vulnerable. The Prometheus slipped beneath the massive Korik destroyer, unleashing a barrage of high-energy plasma bolts directly into the ship's engine housing. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Secondary explosions rippled along the destroyer's hull as power conduits overloaded. "Direct hit, Captain. Their main engines are offline," Miller reported, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. "Don't celebrate yet," Reed cautioned. "They have 299 more ships." But the destruction of their lead vessel had introduced an element the Korik weren't prepared for: chaos. Their rigid formation began to break apart as ships maneuvered to target the Prometheus. "Captain, 3 vessels are breaking from hyperspace," Kim shouted. "Earth signatures." Reed allowed himself a small smile. It seemed not everyone at Earth Command had agreed with the official stance of non-intervention. "This is Captain Hernandez of the UES Valiant." A familiar voice came through the comm. "Thought you could use some help. Reed." "Hernandez, Rodriguez, and Joe," Reed acknowledged as the 3 Earth destroyers took up flanking positions. "I was beginning to think Earth had forgotten about us." "Unofficial support only," Hernandez clarified. "We're all facing court-martials when this is over, assuming we survive." "Then let's make it worth it," Reed replied. "Coordinate fire on these targets." With 4 Earth ships now engaging the Korik fleet, the battle shifted. They were still hopelessly outnumbered, but human vessels were designed for combat maneuverability in a way the Korik ships weren't. While the Korik relied on overwhelming firepower and numerical superiority, the Earth ships used hit-and-run tactics, striking vulnerable points before retreating to safety. "Captain," Miller interrupted, "I've been analyzing their command structure. They're relaying all tactical decisions through 5 central command ships. If we could disrupt those—" Reed understood immediately. Aborting action. It was a desperate plan. Sending troops onto an enemy vessel was always high risk. But if they could capture or disable the Korik command ships, it might throw their entire fleet into disarray. "Prepare the Marine contingent," Reed ordered. "I want 30 of our best boarding the primary command vessel." Major Diana Wallace, commander of the Prometheus's Marine detachment, appeared on the bridge minutes later, already in her powered combat armor. "My team is ready, Captain," she reported. "But boarding pods have a high failure rate against capital ships. Most will be shot down before they reach the target." Reed nodded grimly. "That's why we're not using boarding pods. We're going to deliver your team personally." Wallace's eyes widened as she realized what Reed was proposing. "You're going to breach their hull with the Prometheus?" "Not exactly," Reed explained. "We'll use the emergency docking procedure. Make it look like we've been critically damaged and are attempting to surrender." It was insane, reckless, and exactly the kind of unpredictable tactic that might work against the methodical Korik. The plan was set in motion immediately. The Prometheus feigned severe damage, venting atmosphere and shutting down non-essential systems. They sent out a distress signal, indicating their willingness to surrender valuable Earth technology in exchange for the lives of their crew. The Korik command ship, unable to resist such intelligence potential, allowed the crippled Earth vessel to approach. It was only when they were within 100 meters that the trap was sprung. The Prometheus suddenly accelerated, its lateral thrusters firing at maximum capacity, bringing it directly alongside the Korik vessel. Emergency docking clamps deployed, creating a temporary seal between the 2 ships. "Breach team, go!" Reed ordered. Major Wallace led her Marines through the improvised airlock and onto the Korik command ship. What followed was 30 minutes of intense close-quarters combat as the humans fought their way to the vessel's bridge. The Korik, while physically stronger than humans, were unaccustomed to direct combat. Their strategy had always relied on overwhelming force projected from a distance. Against determined human Marines in powered armor, fighting with the desperate intensity of those who know retreat isn't an option, the Korik defenders were outmatched. When Wallace's voice finally came through the comm, Reed could hear weapons fire in the background. "Bridge secured, Captain. We've got control of their systems." Reed didn't waste time on congratulations. Redirect their weapons. Target the secondary command ships. It was the turning point of the battle. The Korik, suddenly finding their own weapons turned against them, fell into disarray. Ships began firing on each other as conflicting commands spread through their fleet. "It's working, Captain!" Miller exclaimed. "They're breaking formation!" Reed watched the tactical display as the carefully organized Korik armada dissolved into chaos. Ships collided with each other as they attempted to evade friendly fire. Others began retreating, jumping to hyperspace without coordination. "Order all Earth ships to concentrate fire on their fuel transports," Reed commanded. The resulting explosions were visible even from the Volani homeworld. Great blooms of energy as 60 Korik warships were consumed in chain reactions. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Reed allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before addressing his crew. "This isn't over," he cautioned. "We've won the first battle, but the Korik Empire still stands. They'll regroup and return with an even larger force unless we act now." The next phase of Reed's plan was even more audacious than the first. With Earth now officially committed to the conflict, Admiral Brooks had reluctantly acknowledged that the intervention had been retroactively authorized. Reed proposed Operation Bloodletting. The Korik depend on a network of shipyards, fuel depots, and weapons factories spread across 12 systems. Reed explained to the assembled captains, "If we strike these targets simultaneously, we can cripple their ability to wage war." It was a bold strategy, dividing their still limited forces to attack multiple targets across a wide area of space. But Reed understood something fundamental about the Korik that many other species didn't. They had never faced a serious setback. Their entire imperial strategy was predicated on continuous victory and expansion. They had no contingency for failure. Earth's fleet, now grown to 27 vessels with the arrival of reinforcements, split into strike teams. Each was assigned specific targets based on their capabilities. The Prometheus, along with the Valiant and 3 other destroyers, targeted the primary Korik shipyard in the next system. It was their largest facility, capable of producing a capital ship every 30 days. When they dropped out of hyperspace, the Korik were still scrambling to organize their defenses. They clearly hadn't expected humans to take the offensive so quickly. "Launch fighters," Reed ordered. "Target their construction bays and antimatter storage facilities." The Earth fighters streaked toward the massive orbital facility, releasing precision munitions against critical infrastructure. On the surface below, Marine dropships delivered ground forces to destroy fuel processing plants and command centers. Similar scenes played out across Korik space as Earth forces struck with surgical precision. They weren't interested in territorial conquest or civilian casualties. Their targets were exclusively military and industrial. The impact was immediate and devastating. Without the ability to replace lost ships or resupply their fleets, the Korik war machine began to sputter. But the most significant consequence came from within the Empire itself. As news of their defeat spread, subjugated worlds began to rebel. Species that had lived under Korik oppression for generations saw an opportunity in their oppressor's weakness. On the Korik throne world, Emperor Vra called an emergency meeting of his military council. The atmosphere was tense, with generals and admirals casting accusatory glances at one another. "How is this possible?" Vra demanded, his armored exoskeleton clicking with agitation. "How have these primitives managed to cripple our forces in less than a standard week?" Grand Admiral Zul, commander of the Imperial Fleet, stepped forward. "My Emperor, the humans employ unorthodox tactics. They do not follow the established protocols of warfare. They improvise." "Improvise?" Vra spat the word like a curse. "We outnumber them 100 to 1. Our technology is superior in every way. And yet they continue to prevail." General Krall observed quietly. "Perhaps it is time to consider withdrawal from Volani space, to consolidate our forces and develop countermeasures against human tactics." The suggestion of retreat was unprecedented in Korik history. Emperor Vra rose from his throne, towering over the general. "The Korik Empire does not retreat," he roared. "We will crush these humans with overwhelming force. Recall all fleets. We will amass our entire navy and exterminate them in a single battle." But even as the order went out, dissent was spreading through the ranks. Junior officers, seeing the futility of fighting against an enemy that refused to engage on conventional terms, began to question their superiors. Some even made contact with Earth forces, offering information in exchange for amnesty. The final blow came when a coalition of 7 subjugated species formally petitioned the Galactic Council for recognition of their independence from the Korik Empire. They cited the human intervention as proof that the Korik were not invincible, and requested Council peacekeepers to oversee their transition to self-governance. Ambassador Talon stood before the Council once more, but this time his posture was straight, his voice clear and confident. "Honorable representatives, what we have witnessed is unprecedented in galactic history. The humans, despite their limited resources and technological disadvantages, have effectively neutralized the Korik threat, not just to Volani, but to dozens of worlds." He displayed holographic images of liberated planets, of Korik warships being decommissioned, of former slave species establishing democratic governments. Most remarkably, the humans have not claimed any territory for themselves. They have not demanded tribute or resources. They intervened solely to protect those who could not protect themselves. And then, they helped establish systems to ensure lasting peace. Council leader Vox seemed troubled. "But their methods, Ambassador, the violence they employed, was directed exclusively at military targets," Talon finished. "There were minimal civilian casualties. The humans understood that destruction alone would not bring peace. They targeted the Korik capacity to make war, while preserving their capacity to build a different future." As the Council debated the implications of human involvement in galactic politics, Captain Reed stood in the observation lounge of the Prometheus, watching the reconstruction efforts on Volani Prime. The living cities, partially damaged during the brief Korik bombardment before Earth forces arrived, were already healing. Enormous biological structures extended new growth, incorporating debris into their structures in a remarkable display of adaptive resilience. Lieutenant Commander Miller joined him, offering a cup of coffee. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said, nodding toward the planet below. Reed nodded. "Hard to believe we almost lost it all." "The Council is establishing a war crimes tribunal," Miller informed him. "The Korik leadership will be held accountable for their actions against dozens of species." "And Earth?" Reed asked. "What's our status with the Council now?" Miller smiled. "We've been invited to apply for full membership. Apparently, saving a Council member from genocide earns you some political capital." Reed took a sip of his coffee, contemplating the implications. Humanity had existed on the fringes of galactic society, viewed with suspicion and fear due to their Deathworld origins and perceived primitive nature. Now, in the span of a few weeks, they had fundamentally altered the balance of power. "It won't be easy," Reed said finally. "The Council species evolved in peaceful environments. They see violence as an aberration, a sign of evolutionary failure. While we evolved through conflict," Miller acknowledged. "They're afraid of what we might do with our seat at the table." Reed turned away from the viewport. "Then, we'll have to show them that the same adaptability that makes us effective warriors also makes us capable of growth and change. We defended the Volani without conquering them. We defeated the Korik without annihilating them." "And what about you, Captain?" Miller asked. "Earth Command is talking about a promotion. Admiral Reed has a nice ring to it." Reed shook his head. "I'm not interested in pushing papers at headquarters. The Prometheus is where I belong." What Reed didn't say was that he felt a profound responsibility for what came next. Humanity had announced its presence on the galactic stage in the most dramatic way possible. They had demonstrated their capacity for both tremendous violence and remarkable restraint. How the other species interpreted those actions would determine the course of human-alien relations for generations. 6 months after the Korik War, as it had come to be known, Reed received a private communication from Ambassador Talon. The Vani diplomat requested a meeting on Volani Prime, where a memorial was being dedicated to those lost in the conflict. Reed found Talon waiting in one of the living gardens that had sprung up from the ruins of a damaged city section. The area was lush with alien vegetation, some of which seemed to respond to their presence by changing colors or emitting soft bioluminescence. "Captain Reed," Talon greeted him, extending both hands in the traditional Vani gesture of respect. "Or should I say Admiral now?" Reed smiled. "I turned it down. Some of us prefer the frontier to the political arena." Talon nodded understanding. "Walk with me, if you would." As they moved through the garden, Reed noticed subtle changes in the Vani ambassador. He stood taller, moved with greater confidence. The events of the past months had transformed him, just as they had transformed the galaxy. "The Council has been studying your species intensively," Talon said, after they had walked in silence for several minutes. "They are struggling to categorize you." Reed raised an eyebrow. "Categorize us?" "Yes. You see, most species fall into recognizable evolutionary patterns. Those from harsh worlds tend to be aggressive, expansionist, concerned primarily with their own survival. Those from benign environments tend toward cooperation, cultural development, philosophical advancement. And humans?" Talon stopped beside a reflective pool. "Humans defy these categories. You evolved on a death world, yet you intervened to save a species you had never met. You possess tremendous capacity for violence, yet you exercise remarkable restraint in its application. You could have conquered the Korik Empire, yet you chose to liberate its subjugated worlds instead." Reed considered this. "Perhaps your categories are too limiting. Maybe sentient life is more complex than your models suggest." "Indeed," Talon agreed. "That is precisely the conclusion the Council is reluctantly approaching. And it raises profound questions about our assumptions regarding evolutionary determinism." A group of young Volani passed by, their translucent skin pulsing with patterns of light that expressed their emotional states. They bowed deeply to Reed, a gesture he still found uncomfortable. He was no hero, despite what the galactic news networks proclaimed. "There is another matter," Talon said, once they were alone again. "The Council has received additional distress calls from systems beyond our regular communication network. It seems the Korik were not the only aggressive power in our galaxy." Reed felt a familiar tension return to his shoulders. "And they want Earth's help?" "They are considering the possibility," Talon admitted. "There is significant resistance, of course. Many Council members fear that involving humans in more conflicts will only lead to greater militarization of galactic society, while others argue that failing to intervene against aggression makes the Council complicit in genocide." Reed finished. Talon's inner eyelids flickered, the Vani equivalent of a wry smile. "You understand our politics better than you let on, Captain." Reed shrugged. "Human history is full of the same debates. When is intervention justified? Who decides? What happens afterward? And what answers has humanity found? None that satisfy everyone," Reed admitted. "But we've learned that doing nothing in the face of atrocity is its own form of action. By choosing not to decide, we still have made a choice." They reached a memorial wall where the names of those lost in the Korik War were inscribed in multiple languages. Reed ran his fingers over the Earth script, recognizing names from his own crew and from other Earth vessels. "When I was first assigned this mission," Reed said quietly, "my orders were to observe and report, to gather intelligence on the Korik for Earth's benefit. Yet you chose to intervene," Talon observed. "Because it was right," Reed said simply. "Not because it was ordered, or because it served Earth's strategic interests. Because standing by while an entire civilization is destroyed is something I couldn't live with." Talon was silent for a long moment. The Council has always valued consensus, stability, the status quo. We debate endlessly while worlds burn. Your species has shown us a different way, decisive action guided by moral principles. We're not always right, Reed cautioned. Human history is full of mistakes, atrocities committed in the name of noble causes. Yet, you learn from those mistakes. Talon countered. You evolve, adapt, grow. It is, perhaps, your greatest strength. As they concluded their meeting, Talon presented Reed with a small crystal containing a recording of the council session where humans had been formally acknowledged as protectors of galactic peace. It was a symbolic gesture, but one that reflected the profound shift in how humanity was perceived. Reed returned to the Prometheus with mixed emotions. Earth had gained tremendous prestige and influence through their actions, but they had also assumed a heavy responsibility. There would be more calls for help, more decisions about when and how to intervene, more debates about humanity's role in galactic affairs. As the Prometheus prepared to depart Volani space, Reed received one final communication, a simple message broadcast on all frequencies, originating from dozens of newly liberated worlds. If ever you hear a cry for help from the stars, know that we will listen, we will respond. We will remember what humanity taught us, that strength without compassion is tyranny. But strength guided by justice can bring freedom to the oppressed and hope to the hopeless. Reed ordered the message saved in the ship's permanent archives. Whatever came next, whatever challenges humanity faced as they took their place among the stars, they would carry this moment with them, the moment when a species born on a death world had brought not destruction, but liberation. The Prometheus entered hyperspace, its course set for Earth. But Reed knew they would return to the frontier soon enough, in a galaxy where oppression still existed, where the strong preyed upon the weak. There would always be calls for help. And now, because of what had happened here, those calls would be answered. In the years that followed, the relationship between humanity and the Galactic Council evolved in unexpected ways. Earth's willingness to commit military resources to protect vulnerable species made them both valued allies and feared potential adversaries. But as more Council species adopted elements of human adaptability and decisiveness, the old power structures began to change. The Choric Empire, once the dominant force in its sector, was reformed into a confederation of equal partners, with former subject worlds given full autonomy and representation. Emperor Vra was removed from power by his own military council, replaced by a civilian government tasked with rebuilding Choric society without conquest as its driving purpose. Captain Reed continued to serve on the frontier, the Prometheus becoming a symbol of hope throughout the galaxy. He never accepted promotion beyond his captaincy, preferring to remain where he could make the most difference, on the bridge of his ship, ready to respond when the next cry for help echoed across the stars. Ambassador Talon became one of the Council's most influential voices, advocating for a more proactive approach to confronting aggression and protecting vulnerable civilizations. He often cited the human intervention as proof that military strength, when guided by moral purpose, could be a force for good in the galaxy. The living cities of Volani grew and expanded, incorporating elements from a dozen worlds as refugees and diplomats came to study their remarkable healing capabilities. At the center of the capital city, a monument was erected, not to the war or the victory, but to the moment of decision when beings from across the galaxy chose to stand together against tyranny. On that monument, written in every known language, was a simple phrase that had become something of a galactic mantra. The measure of a civilization is not its technological advancement or military might, but its willingness to defend those who cannot defend themselves. It was a principle that humanity had brought to the stars, not through preaching or philosophy, but through action. And in doing so, they had transformed not only the galaxy, but themselves, finding their place in the cosmic community not as conquerors or isolationists, but as protectors. The Deathworlders had brought destruction, yes, but only to those who threatened the peace. And in that destruction, they had created something far more powerful than any weapon or fleet: the belief that justice could prevail, even against overwhelming odds. It was a legacy that would endure long after the Korik War faded into history, a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected allies are the ones who make the greatest difference. And somewhere, in the vast darkness between the stars, the next call for help was already forming, waiting to be heard by those who had promised to listen.